There's lore in Peak? Yes. In fact, this quote-unquote friend slop game where your only job is to climb has some of the craziest lore I have ever encountered. It's a story of teamwork, betrayal, and strangest of all, divine intervention. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that is peak when it comes to theorizing. And speaking of peak, if you're like me, I'm sure your homepage and especially your shorts feed has been filled with these colorful characters climbing, falling, and just doing the craziest things.
You want to go?
Sure, I'll try. I don't think I was in there!
This, of course, is the latest multiplayer game to take the YouTube and streaming world by storm. Peak. It's actually taken over the internet so much, it spawned a new name for this genre of game, friend slop. Now, I'm not in love with that name, but I do immediately understand what it means when someone says it. Goofy multiplayer games with proximity chat that are perfect for streaming. And Peak is exactly that. You and your fellow scouts crash on a deserted island, and your only goal is to get to the peak to be rescued. It's simple, it's silly, and I've had such a blast playing it on GT Live and with my friends on my own personal streams trying desperately not to die.
Oh, my legs!
At Dapper Mr. Tom Live on YouTube, by the way. But even when I'm just trying to have a laugh with my friends, the theory brain never fully turns off. And so, as I worked my way to the peak, I slowly began to notice small details that tell us that things might not be as simple as I was first led to believe. From small items we can find, to the different biomes, to a demonic scoutmaster that's trying to kill you, there is definitely lore here. We just need to make like a Boy Scout and work together to find it. So buckle those seatbelts, loyal theory scouts, because we are about to crash land on Lore Island and climb all the way to its twisty peak. As a scout, our first task when we land in the middle of nowhere is, of course, figure out where the heck we are. That way we can truly assess the situation and understand what kind of lore we're up against. And the most obvious place to start is to look at the biomes we encounter throughout the game. Before the recent update, there were 4 main biomes. The shore, basically a beach, the tropics, a tropical jungle, the alpines, a snowy mountain range, and the caldera/kiln, a volcano. That's quite a lot of things in what is only a 2,000-meter climb. And as we talked about in our Mario Kart video, that's too close for these things to realistically be together. But this wouldn't be a very fun episode if I said that, so instead, we're just gonna look for somewhere that is likely larger, but does have all of these biomes located in it to give us an idea of the location. Let's start with the volcanoes, as while there are a lot of them on this Earth, you can see on maps like this one that they tend to be grouped together in specific areas, like the west of the Americas, Southern Europe, Eastern Africa, East and South Asia, the Polynesian Islands, and Iceland. This is because volcanoes form along tectonic plate boundaries. When those tectonic plates either move apart to leave a gap in the Earth's mantle, or move together to create high-pressure gases that burst through the Earth's crust, bam, you've got yourself a volcano. The tectonic plate lines also tend to be along the coastline of most land masses, so if there's a volcano, most of the time there is a shore somewhat close by, which is another one of the biomes we need, but it doesn't help us narrow things down all that much. So on to the next one, the tropics. Tropical rainforests tend to emerge around the equator. The higher temperatures and longer hours of hot sunlight cause warm, moist air to rise and create consistent high rainfall, which provides the ideal conditions for plants to grow rapidly, creating these towering rainforests. So if these can only really exist across the equator, by overlaying the maps of the rainforests we know of and the volcano map from earlier, we immediately can knock out our crash site being anywhere in Northern America, Europe, and some parts of Africa and Asia. Okay, getting warmer. Well, actually, no, it's the exact opposite, because now we have to find a place where the Alpines can also exist. Now, when you think of the Alpines, I'm sure the first place that comes to mind is the literal Alps that are in Europe. But as we've already shown, Europe doesn't have the climate for a tropical jungle, so it can't be there. There are also the Japanese Alps, but again, no tropical jungles. Does that mean we're out of options then? Not quite, because thankfully the word Alps is more than just a name for a few specific places. The word actually comes from the Latin word Alpes, which is likely an adjective of the word albus, meaning white, because the tops of the mountains are covered in white snow. That word was then taken to describe a type of biome like we're seeing called the alpine tundra, which is basically any set of mountains that have a high enough elevation and are therefore covered in snow. Mount Kilimanjaro is one such snowy mountaintop, and it's actually a dormant volcano, so we get to double up on our biomes there. Plus, it's located in Tanzania, which is in Eastern Africa, where you can find the East African montane forests, a group of smaller tropical forests that could work really nicely as our potential lost scout location. Another set of snowy mountains would be the Andes Mountains in South America. They're right next to the Amazon rainforest, and as we saw from our map earlier, there are no shortage of volcanoes around there. But this is where things initially seem to get a bit more complicated. See, the devs weren't happy just having a successful multiplayer game with 4 interesting biomes. They had to release updates for the game, including a 5th biome, the Mesa. Now, in the game, the Mesa actually replaces the Alpines on certain days. But fortunately, that doesn't actually change much for us, because while there are mesas across the world, there are still only 2 main locations where mesas exist alongside tropical rainforests and volcanoes: Eastern Africa and the west coast of South America. Well, kinda. You see, there are desert hills down near the Andes, but they're technically not mesas. They are what are known as plateaus. A plateau is an elevated area with a relatively flat top and cliffs on multiple sides, just not all sides. While a mesa is the same thing, just smaller, with cliffs on every single side. So if you squint, South America kinda has mesas, just really big ones. But I hear you guys, no, that's cheating. The answer must therefore be Africa, which actually has mesas. And I'd agree, if it weren't for one of the rare and very exciting discoveries you can find in Peak. When traversing either the Alpines or the Mesa, you have a chance to come across these adorable little guys.
Capybaras.
These are capybaras. It's a bit of an odd sight, as capybaras are actually more drawn to wetlands or dense forest areas, as opposed to the deserts and snowy mountains we find them in. But that aside, their appearance is the final piece to our puzzle, because capybaras are native to only one of our 2 options: South America. I guess that means there's always both the Alpines and the Mesa. It just depends where you land as to which one you end up traversing during the climb. And actually, South America as an answer makes a lot of sense when you remember that in real life, there was a plane that crashed into the Andes in 1972, right near a volcano. 45 passengers were on that plane, and the ones who survived the initial crash eventually had to resort to cannibalism to survive, which also matches another recent Peak update where they too allowed you to eat your fellow survivors. But that crash involved the Old Christians Club Rugby Union and their families. Our crashed plane only involved Boy Scouts, so it's not quite a one-to-one, which makes it trickier to use for our lore purposes. So what can we use to help us on that front? Maybe the outfits? You do get some pretty great outfits from these expeditions, and all you need is a badge to get them. In the real world, things aren't quite that simple. You need money to get an outfit this fly. Fortunately, that's where our sponsor Chime comes in. Honestly, if I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, I'd know that as long as I have Chime and their brand new Chime card with me, I'd be totally fine. You see, Chime is changing how people feel about their money, constantly adding features and tools helping them to avoid the pitfalls of traditional financial institutions. For example, while it may just look like a normal credit card, the Chime card is anything but. You decide how much money goes into your Chime secured deposit account, which means you can only spend what you have. You can also turn on safer credit building so your account is paid off automatically, so there's no fear of your credit score dipping that way either. And there's no annual fees or interest, which is great if you're trying to save up for those flights for your next vacation. Just maybe don't take Bing Bong Airlines. And the savings don't stop there, because if you use the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen to sign up today and set up a direct deposit, you can get 3.75% APY on your savings, 1.5% cashback on rotating categories like gas, groceries, and bills, and fee-free overdrafts of up to $200. That's how I was able to save up to buy flights back to the UK to visit my family this year. My godbrother is getting married and I didn't want to miss it, so all these little extra savings really came in handy. Literally, any way you slice it, Chime is helping make your money work for you in order to tackle those extra expenses whenever they arise. And to top it all off, if you sign up and open a Chime checking account today, you could earn up to $300 $350 on top of everything else we've talked about. Just think of all the supplies we could buy with that. Maybe we could buy something that will help us find the law. Maybe not. I guess we gotta keep exploring. So thanks again to Chime for sponsoring this video, but let's get on back to answering the question of where we can actually find the lore in Peak. Well, the answer once again comes down to the brand new update. Not only did the devs add the Mesa biome, they also hid a special little secret inside of it. Within a rocky outcropping, you have a chance to find a hole. Inside that hole are treasures beyond your wildest dreams. Stop it. Once you head on down, you enter what is called the Tomb. And after a bit of parkouring, you come face to face with an item known as the Ancient Idol. Now, given we're in South America, the idea that this kind of thing exists isn't all that surprising. The Inca Empire used to live across the Andes during the 15th century, and they used to build golden statues of their gods in order to worship them. To the Inca people, gold wasn't seen as a precious metal, it was a sacred substance that represented the sun's power. This tied in specifically to the god Inti, a young boy that was worshipped as the sun god. However, the ancient idol we find in Peak isn't really a boy. I mean, I guess you would call it that, but in actuality, the statue is of the in-universe character Bing Bong.
Bing Bong, Bing Bong!
No, not you. Go back to film theory. If you've never played Peak before, Bing Bong is the name of the mascot for Bing Bong Airlines, the airline that got you stuck on this island in the first place. His face is on the plane, it's on the food, but most importantly, he takes the form of a plushie that is found on the plane after it crashes. Now, he's on the adventure with you, and players will do almost anything to keep him safe and bring him to the Peak with them.
We have to make sure Bing Bong gets here.
Everyone, Bing Bong is okay.
Chad tells me I can cook Bing Bong.
Don't you dare! Don't you dare! Don't do it for me. Do it for Bing Bong. Bing Bong, we did it!
So then, if he's just the airline's mascot, why on earth is there an ancient idol depicting him? Could this be an instance of a cargo cult? There have been examples of cargo cults all throughout the 20th century, but one of the most widely known is from the Melanesian islands during and after World War II. Japanese forces, as well as Allied forces, landed on these islands, bringing with them medicines, clothing, food, weapons, and technology that the indigenous people of these islands had never seen before. These things were so advanced compared to anything they were used to, and with some of this cargo being dropped from the literal heavens, these visitors became like gods to them. However, eventually the war ended and those visitors went away, taking all of their supplies with them. The islanders were naturally confused as to why the airdrops weren't happening anymore, and the conclusion they landed on was because no one was running the airports that had been built by the visitors. So they started a cult that mimicked the behaviors and rituals they saw from these visitors, lighting up the runways with fire, waving signal cones, doing marching drills with wood carved to look like guns, all with the hopes of bringing back those they saw as gods and the gifts that came with them. In Peak, it is clear that we are not the first plane to have crashed on this island. During one of your climbs, there is a 95% chance that you will encounter a character known as the Looker. He is a fellow scout that crashed sometime on this island before you and just spies on you from a distance. He's certainly creepy, but not as creepy as another stranded soul you can find, or more terrifyingly, can find you. At the start of your run, there is a guidebook on how to survive the game, written by Scoutmaster Myers. It's pretty straightforward stuff: how to climb, how to point, and of course, rule 0, don't abandon a friend in need. Makes sense as a guidebook that any scout would carry. But as you reach the campfires at the top of each biome, there's a chance that you find journal entries written by the man himself, because he too crashed on this island. Again, these notes do give advice for survival, like which mushrooms will or won't poison you, how campfires work, and how you can bring your friends back to life. How wacky! But as you collect more of them, suddenly a darker truth begins to reveal itself. Not only did he crash here with his troop, but once they got to the Alpines, things started getting dicey. Bonus rule 5 tells us about a moon-shaped fruit he comes across that puts him to sleep. And when he wakes up in bonus rule ? All his scouts have left him behind. Slowly, he begins to go mad. He starves and becomes an undead-looking monster. Now, if you abandon your friends for too long, he will hunt you down and kill you.
Uh-oh. Ow.
It's actually pretty terrifying, but the point is that there have been a number of plane crashes on this island before ours, probably all connected to Bing Bong Airlines given the amount of suitcases lying around containing Bing Bong airline food. So it wouldn't be too outlandish to think that the indigenous people saw Bing Bong on the plane parts, on the food, and in plushie form and thought this must be their god. His face is everywhere, and so they created an idol to worship it in the hopes that it would bless them with more supplies and visitors. Which I guess means it worked out. Except that would imply this idol is just that, an idol, a statue that doesn't have any kind of power. But that isn't the case. When you pick up this idol, it not only weighs a ton, but it grants you invincibility. You are now immune to all forms of damage, which is crazy powerful. But why does it give you that power if it's just a random cargo cult statue? Unless it's not just a statue. See, the Incans believed that their idols were way more than just golden carvings of their gods. They were a physical manifestation that embodied that god's power and presence. It was essentially an extension of that god. So, if the idol is giving off special power, that is reflective of the powers of the god the idol is designed to look like. Meaning that Bing Bong is actually a god.
I do have Jesus, and Jesus believes in your climbing ability.
And people say FNAF's the only franchise we give the crazy theory treatment. But listen, some kind of divine entity would explain all the weird goings on around this place, like the scout statues that bring you back to life, supernatural items that defy the laws of physics, why the Scoutmaster didn't just die on the mountain but became an undead monster that can literally survive anything, including lava. That's not something a starving human can do. It all points to the supernatural, and with the only godlike statue being of Bing Bong, as well as the fact that during the early days of Peak's release, a number of streamers found that Bing Bong could talk.
Hello, I'm Bing Bong. I'm here.
Lips move when you talk, Bing Bong.
Of course. Yours do too.
It makes the most sense for that divine entity to be Bing Bong. He was talking to us through the plushie. The only thing this doesn't really explain is why would Bing Bong use his powers to curse the Scoutmaster when he was the victim? He was abandoned by his troop. Well, maybe. The answer lies not in Bing Bong himself, but in the main imagery that we see repeated across this island. The scouts themselves. The statues are scouts, the tombs have scouts on the walls, and every single crash we've learnt about or survivor we've seen has been involved in the scouts. Clearly, the scouts are important to this mystery. So I decided to pull out my old scout handbook to refresh myself on their practices. And what stood out to me were the foundational principles the scouts were built upon. The Scout's Oath. It goes like this. On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country, and to obey the Scout law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? It literally matches what we have to do when we land on this island. We have to work together to help each other. We have to remain physically strong in order to climb. We need to not eat things that will make us fall asleep, and we need to not betray each other. If you do all those things, you're almost guaranteed to get to the peak. Break any, and you will surely fail. Our plane crashed to teach us these principles so that by the end, we would be better scouts. And Scoutmaster Myers, he failed this task. He fell asleep on the job, which is not very mentally awake, and he hadn't trained his scouts well enough, leading them to break their own oaths and not help him. He failed, and so they failed, leading to the god of this world, Bing Bong, to curse him and forcing him to punish those who also failed to keep their oaths. This mountain we climb isn't a random trail. It's a pilgrimage, a journey that leads you to personal transformation, much like the Inca Trail in the Andes used by the Inca people all those years ago. Bing Bong is drawing scouts from across the world to this island, crashing the planes that his face is on and continuing the cycle of scouts' growth and maturity that he has been teaching people for centuries.
Like, canonically, Bing Bong is Jesus now.
But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching.
World premiere on Game Theory.
The legend of the Deltarune is alive.